40-some applications where partners and Oracle have built applications around top of this architecture. So, all right, so end of the Oracle advertisement. But if anybody wants any of these, just bring your checkbook up. That'd be something. So where are we heading as an industry? And I think the important thing is we're starting to see a move towards just more informed medicine. You've heard terms like evidence-based medicine. You've heard this term, personalized medicine. Basically what it's all talking about is being able to treat a patient with knowledge of that patient's unique and specific situation. So in the past, we've had trial and error medicine, and I've got a slide on that in a minute, but basically it's based on the ability to, you basically look at a patient, figure out what's wrong with them, and you treat them the same way you treat everybody else with appendicitis or everybody else with leukemia or whatever the disease is. And you don't really have we haven't in the past had the ability to understand more about that unique patient, what's specific to their disease that may be different from the guy down the hall in another room. So it's basically understanding the basic way to treat a disease and giving that a try. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. If that doesn't work, you try something else. It's kind of like having a computer back in the 70s and calling the engineer out to fix it. Basically, and I remember Deck doing this, and the guy would come in and he'd start swapping things out. Eventually, he'd find the thing that was wrong, and he'd come up and he'd say, okay, it's fixed. Usually didn't know exactly what he fixed or what was wrong with it. Something wrong with his board, but you know, he swapped out enough things that the problem went away. So anyway, so this is nothing new. This is Sir William Osler in 1906 basically is describing personalized healthcare here. Or to put it the way Mark Twain does, you know, supposing is good, but finding out is better. Understanding what's wrong with a patient, understanding their unique situation is important. So this is all personalized medicine, and it's not just about gathering information and understanding what's wrong with the patient. It's also about the life sciences, understanding their genetic makeup, understanding their proclivity for a given disease or likelihood of contracting a disease. And if they do, understanding based on their genetic sequence, their genome, understanding what treatments are likely to work on them as opposed to somebody else based on their genetic makeup. So pretty unique stuff. So here's the trial and error medicine. So basically the old method was, as a patient got sicker and sicker, you try drug after drug until something worked, and then you know, patient gets better and you feel better. But so the newer personalized medicine approach to this is you try to understand the predisposition of the patient, their likelihood of contracting a disease, being a little bit more proactive about it, screening the patient for the likelihood of getting that disease, understanding what drugs are going to work on them because of their genetic makeup, and being able to treat them sooner with the right drug, with better drugs, and being able to stop the disease before it progresses to greater states, greater acuity. And then, of course, what we'd all like to get to is preventive medicine, which is, by doing that screening, be able to predict and prevent those problems from occurring. So here's, I think this is interesting. This is some real-time statistics about, that show, not real-time, some real statistics that show the value of understanding more about a disease. So 60 years ago, leukemia would be called a disease of the blood. Really didn't understand it too well. They identified it 50 years ago, maybe had it stratified into 5 or 6 different types of leukemia 40 years ago. And now today, there's all these different types of leukemia. And there's different treatments based on the type of leukemia. And if you look at the 5-year survival rate over on the right-hand side, that's gone from 0% 60 years ago to 70% today. Now, part of that's because we just practice better medicine today, but definitely there's some aspect of it that's basically supporting the idea that the more you know about a disease and about a patient, the better off you are. That sounds obvious, right? So I'm going to skip this slide because I want to make sure I get to everything here. So, this is just a slide, I think this is interesting, that shows the effectiveness of drugs used to treat these different problems, so hypertension, heart failure, antidepressant, etc. So not extremely effective. And if you look at this from a cost perspective to the industry, there's some huge numbers associated with the lack of effectiveness of these drugs for these particular diseases. So pretty interesting. So as I mentioned before, you know, personalized medicine is about understanding more about the patient by collecting information in real time and making it available in near real time about the patient, so you understand more about the patient when you're treating him. You can start at square 5 in treating him rather than starting at 0. At the same time, understanding more about their genetic makeup, which tells you what diseases are likely to get and what treatments are likely to work. Those two areas are coming together, and this is what Oracle is all about, actually. Our Health Sciences Global Business Unit, which is kind of an entrepreneurial startup within the company, separate P&L, is about life sciences and healthcare, and more importantly, the convergence of the two, utilizing the increasing power and capability to gather information about patients and the ability to gather genetic information about patients, bringing all that together so that when they're treated, when a physician treats a patient, they have a lot more information and they're very well informed and can do a lot better job of treating the patient. So the benefits of this personalized medicine are great, and again, I won't go into detail about this, but I think this is interesting. As I was looking at this today, I thought, shift emphasis in medicine from reaction to prevention. What if we only fix software bugs when our users encounter them? That's basically the way we've done medicine in a reactionary mode, right? So you don't do QA, you just send the software out there and you fix the bugs when our users come up with it. We would never imagine doing that in the software business, and yet in healthcare, you know, people's lives are at stake, and we kind of practice medicine that way. And for any physician in the room, I don't mean to offend you, but so really, this is all about the convergence of life sciences and clinical care, being able to collect what we call phenotypic data, or the clinical information about the patient that's being treated, combine that with genetic information or understanding what's under the covers for a patient, and being able to link the two. And there's a lot of research going on. We're working with Moffitt Cancer Center to do exactly that, where we've got tools that we're building with them to basically look at diseases and given demographics and categorization of patients into a cohort, and bringing that in and correlating that to the genetic information about those types of patients to look for genetic markers to try to understand what genes and proteins are responsible for what diseases. And that's one of the things that keeps me coming to work every day, because if we can continue this and get better at it and make a big difference, we can really make a big difference to healthcare. So, right information technology infrastructure to capture outcomes data, to understand health and disease, and then be able to apply this knowledge in a systematic way to care in a framework that rewards value. Pretty simple, right? That's it. Thank you.
Before I open up for question and answers, the Thai Silicon Valley License SIG would like to thank our president and mentor, Vish Mishra, for his guidance and support. He's introduced this SIG after he took on as president, and of course, without him, we wouldn't be having this program. I'd like to start off with the first question, if I may. Mark, that was a very insightful presentation, and I wanted to ask if you could comment on what the opportunities are, given the state of affairs in Washington these days, the reform bill and the funds that are being allocated for, for this, are they still available, you think? And as part of the Thai 50 initiative, we've counted over 300 startups in the last 18 months in this healthcare informatics space. I wonder what the future of those companies would be, given this whole situation. So, could you please comment on that?
Sure. So, I'm not a big proponent of going after grant monies. The problem is, they're a one-time shot. There's no recurring budget, typically limited. They've got to pay for salaries and everything. And in this industry, I've never been extremely successful. I've never had my teams be extremely successful going after grant money. So, so that's one thing, and the grants are being awarded, and people are developing EMRs, and that space of electronic medical records for inpatient or outpatient environment is very crowded. There are lots of companies doing that and trying to go after that grant money that's basically $40,000 per physician. But that said, there's still a huge opportunity in this space. The opportunity is around the ability to integrate data, the ability to make it available for analytics and the ability to provide transparency to the industry. So basically fostering those market forces that are still in their infancy in healthcare and need to be addressed. There's not yet the competition that needs to be there. Although we are seeing a fair amount of competition in the area where hospitals want to serve technology out to their physician communities in order to nurture that relationship so they'll admit patients to that hospital. And so the laws changed to enable that about 7 or 8 years ago. The Stark laws are called, but it really is not really started to catch on until people started to look at the value of the data and analytics and data warehousing. And now we're seeing major healthcare institutions are coming to us and saying, I don't know what to do. I'm building a new hospital. I'm afraid that we're going to lose market share because we can't get data out to our physicians. And if we don't do that soon, we're going to lose market share and we won't be able to pay for that hospital when it's done. So those kinds of things that they're thinking about. So the way that hospitals go about increasing their market share today is by establishing, establishing better relationships with their physicians in the community. And a lot of that is providing the technology to serve information out to them. Yes?
I'm an IT person just like you are. And I have a question, because you talked about Oracle having a data system and IBM and Microsoft and all that. But they are the big guys. What about small entrepreneurs? So I've got 2 questions. One is, tell me 3 areas where small entrepreneurs have an opportunity. Number 1. Number 2, is an intelligent EMR is one of those top 3 areas.
Okay, so let's see. Hope I caught all of this. So the areas where I think there's opportunity, one big area is in integration. And figuring out a way to collect data from all the different source systems that exist in the community or within a hospital. There are different things we've heard about ways to do that are more automated. But traditionally, that space has been brute force. Everybody complies with HL7. One of our strategy folks that Prashant works with calls HL7. I don't know if everybody know what HL7 is. It's a ASCII level 7 protocol for communicating healthcare information. He calls it a hint, not a standard, which I think is interesting. But there's so much variability that's allowable within the standard that there's still all this manual integration to do it. So if anybody cracks that nut, that's a huge, huge potential opportunity. It's starting to get better because the EMRs are being required to be certified in order to get the funding, but it's still not standard enough that it's easy to do that integration. So what was the second one?
EMR, one of them.
Oh yeah, so EMR is definitely an opportunity. You got to figure out how to differentiate yourself though, because there's hundreds of EMR vendors out there. If I were doing a startup right now, it would not be about EMRs. I think where I would focus is more on the unique, highly clinical analytics. So being able to do things like when a patient comes into the hospital to look at their current situation, their current diagnosis, their problem list, and predict how likely it is that they're going to contract a hospital-acquired infection, or how likely it is when they leave that they're going to get readmitted. Because those are the things right now that hospitals used to get paid for, and now Medicaid is refusing to pay for. They're saying, analytics is a hot area right now. And so, there's a few companies doing the plumbing, the infrastructure, the enabling enterprise-wide architecture like Oracle. Nobody's doing it as well as we are. But there are a few companies doing that. And there are lots of companies doing analytics, nowhere near the same amount of companies that are doing EMRs. And the other thing is, EMRs you're going to have to differentiate based on more commodity types of aspects of your business. In analytics, you can differentiate based on value, which is obviously much more lucrative.
So I was wondering if there is any kind of deadline issued by the government for the hospitals to comply, and this system helps to filter the best from the rest. So what would be the incentive for the physician to come on board, especially an independent physician?
To come on board with meeting the meaningful use criteria?
Right.
Well, so a couple different things. If they want to be able to take advantage of the funding that's available to automate their practice, so if you are a physician, you want to put an EMR in place, you don't have one, you can get funding from the federal government. Secondly, most physicians have Medicare or Medicaid patients, and they're going to get penalized just like a hospital is if they don't comply with the requirements. And so they're going to be motivated to do that as well. Although I've heard lots of physicians say, I don't care, it's too much trouble, I'm not going to worry about it, I'll deal with it. And I've heard some physicians say, I'm not accepting any Medicare or Medicaid patients anymore because I'm tired of all the price cuts, or the reimbursement cuts. But for the most part, I think that's what's happening. There are deadlines. There's like a progressive deadline. There are different criteria that are needed for each deadline over the next few years. I don't know it off the top of my head what the requirements are mapped to each deadline, but if you search on the web, you can easily find the criteria for meaningful use.
Question about hospitals. There seems to be a lot of automation in the hospitals, and that activity seems to be going on well. The problem, I think, is that bulk of the healthcare goes on in the group practices, and the doctors there don't seem to be very amenable to automation, because even today, the primary mode of transferring data from one doctor to another is a 50-year-old fax machine, and that has not changed and does not seem likely to change in the near future. Do you think, is there any way that that will be sort of driven into changing, getting the doctors to automate?
Well, there's been a gradual automation trend in healthcare. Before all this happened in 2009 when ARA came out, there was probably, depending on the community, somewhere between 5 and 20% of physicians had electronic medical records. Most of them have practice management systems which do scheduling and billing. Very few of them had actual electronic medical records. We've seen that number increase pretty rapidly based on meaningful use. There's still the holdouts, but I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, usually the people that are holding out are the older physicians who aren't as comfortable with computers. They've never used them. They don't feel like they need them. They don't, and EMRs, let's face it, EMRs, they're kind of like CRM systems, right? They're not good for the salespeople. They slow you down. They're a pain. My teams hate them, but they're really good for management. And I think EMRs are kind of the same thing. There's no way that an electronic system can speed up a physician's ability to work and help them see more patients. They can make it more efficient from a global perspective, looking at how different aspects of the practice run. And so I think if you look at it holistically, most physicians will recognize the value in it. But if you look at it from the perspective of when I go in the room to treat a patient, it just slows me down. I have to type. I don't know how to type. They just get frustrated. They don't like to use it. In fact, my doctor that I spoke of earlier, I'm not leaving, by the way, he's a good doctor. He has a voice recognition system, and he likes technology. So it doesn't work for him very well. So he doesn't do it in real time when he treats patients, but he spends an hour at the end of every day transcribing his notes that he took during the day into the speech recognition system because he likes it so much, and it brings value to him. But mostly he's a techno doc, right? So he likes it. But there, it's interesting. There's lots of socioeconomic types of aspects that go into determining who's adopting technology and when.
So you talked about speed. Thank you, first of all, for the speech and the data. If you're talking about a centralized exchange to hold information on patients, how are we going to deal with the storage and the retrieval to do with this? There are at least 200+ million citizens, and each one's got data. Some of them have got complex information, MRIs, which cannot be compressed. How does this get handled?
Yeah. It's probably a question for Prashant in the back if you're asking technically how we handle data access and how we're ensuring that performance is adequate and cost. It's surprisingly low cost. It used to be data warehouses for patients were easily $5 to $10 million just to get started, and it's not that expensive anymore. It's a fraction of that. Oracle's expensive is what I hear every day, all day. But you know, the price is coming down. Technology is getting better. Prashant, do you want to address this question? Is there a microphone back there? Did you hear the question?
Could you repeat that, please?
So the question was, how do we handle the complexity of information, all the different types of information that might get stored in a data warehouse with respect to efficiently getting it out of the data warehouse and being able to do it in a cost-effective manner?
That's another hour's discussion, so if Ty is interested, I'll be happy to come and talk about that. But simply put, what we have is a warehouse, as Mark pointed out. The question is not just how do you take the data out and how do you present it in a cost-effective, easy manner. The question is also how do you bring data in from these myriad source systems. So there's challenges at both ends. So it's an animal that's got a fiery face and a whiplash tail. How do we do it? Well, I don't want to talk about Oracle products specifically, but there are ways by which we've got enough in warehousing and BI in general and near real-time analytics. There's enough evidence out there to show there are certain preferred methods that work better than others. In my opinion, like Mark's iceberg slide, that is still 10% of the issue. It's important to get it out there because people make decisions based on it, and it's a critical visual presentation component. But the challenge also, I think, lies in bringing the data in. How do you bring the data in, varying lineage, varying semantics, varying schemas, and make it sensible, make it integrated, and make it usable for people. Happy to talk about the details of how we do it. Please contact me offline, and I'll be happy to answer any generic questions without doing Mark's job for him.
Which he always does. Thanks, Prashant. So Prashant was he was the primary architect that designed this healthcare data model that is the basis of our analytics product. I think, you know, one of the things, aspects of that Prashant touched on is it's really a philosophy about how you address this. We really put a lot of focus into doing as much as we can to unlock the value of the data as far upstream as we can. And we feel like that's the strategy that works best. There are other vendors that do just the opposite. They grab it quickly, throw it in into the attribute table, value table, and then they worry about all the stuff they need to do to it when they pull it out. And then I think you're right. You know, that could be a performance issue, and it's, you know, may turn into something where you haven't collected the right data to do what you need to do to it. So.
But I was, I don't know, but I was specifically talking about an area like Cleveland Clinic. Thank you.
So I was talking about an location like Cleveland Clinic that has incredible amount of storage going into storing MRI data, for example, and for each patient per day they have a huge amount of storage getting generated. And if you want to keep this over a lifetime of a patient so that you can go back and correlate, it's going to be it's a feast for storage vendors.
Yeah, so if I go back to my days when I worked for IBM, one of the things I did there was to sell storage systems for medical imaging, which was really interesting. So there are lots of unique aspects of image files. For one thing, they don't typically use databases for image files. Oracle's database can handle DICOM images, but most of the time they use the file system. And when I say they, I'm talking about GE and Philips and Fuji and the different PACS vendors. And then the other thing is, you know, they need to be able, as you mentioned, they need to be able to manage those images in such a way, and this is very important, so that the more frequently accessed images are easier to get to, are on faster spinning disk, and are more easily referenceable. And there needs to be an automatic way. Usually it's broken into 3 tiers. You have primary, secondary, and tertiary storage. For tertiary, it may even be off-site, it may be on tape in a jukebox. Or it may just be on progressively slower disks or whatever, cheaper disks, more importantly. And so there needs to be an automatic way that when you access, you still have the stubs available to you, so when you access an image in the file system, it's smart enough to know to go get it if it's in tertiary storage or secondary storage, bring it into primary storage, and then it becomes, you know, faster to access it. So some sophisticated techniques like that, I think, are necessary. But you're right, I mean, it's going to get worse before it gets better. If you look at pathology imaging, where there are folks now who are starting to image entire microbiology slides or cell slides, and it's like 7 layers deep, and the resolution obviously is very high in a microscope. So those images are 5, 6, 7 times as large as the largest typical CAT scan images, which are multiple slices. So we're talking about a huge amount of data, a huge amount of storage, and it's growing exponentially. So that needs to be addressed. I will say though, I don't see a lot of our customers coming to us and saying we're having real problems managing our images. I think the vendors that do that kind of thing are pretty much ahead of the game. I think they do a pretty good job. There's been some really interesting stuff done out of UPMC. It's kind of old now, but it's still applicable with a company called Stentor that was here in the Bay Area that did a unique kind of compression algorithm that basically made it easier to transmit images across the networks, and they could do demos of their product remotely from their offices here for physicians in the UK and not see significant degradation of speed. So I don't see it as a big problem. I don't technically know exactly why. It just seems like those vendors do a pretty good job of managing their images.
Hi. As a backward nation, the United States has an opportunity to learn from countries that have actual healthcare systems and maybe have worked out not just enterprise but regional and national ways to integrate and harvest the value of healthcare information. I'm wondering, what lessons there are for us to learn from, for example, I don't know, Iceland was sharing a lot of information with Decode as an act of parliament and democratic deliberation, and then of course there are countries with actual healthcare systems. So I'm wondering how the IT works and what we can learn from that.
So you're right, I agree with you. As far as
Oracle, so that's for everyone to blog. Oracle agrees the United States
no,
is technologically...
Mark McCord agrees that there are countries that are ahead of the U.S. in their philosophy about, yeah, don't blog me, please. There are countries like the UK and Canada that are ahead of the US in providing, nationwide networks to provide interoperability and transfer of information and province-wide electronic health records. Most of the reason, in my opinion, is, and I don't consider myself an expert on this, but I think most of the reason is their healthcare systems are simpler. And they also, it's kind of like the difference between somebody like Kaiser and somebody like, some other large IDN. Kaiser owns their docs. So, when I was with IBM, we were real excited because we built a CIS for them and we had 99% physician adoption. Well, they're all told to use it. So, I'm not sure how big an accomplishment that was, but it was a nice system. But in Canada, socialized medicine is a 70% single payer system. And so it's a much simpler, first of all, the systems are simpler because they don't have to worry about all the myriad of payers that must be dealt with, the different formats, the different types of reimbursement. But they also have kind of a simpler governing aspect or simpler governance, so that their physicians are more likely to use whatever they roll out. So they've been ahead of most of the world in Canada for a long time. It's probably rolled out a little slower than they had hoped it would, but they've got some pretty nice automated systems throughout the different provinces up there. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but it's probably to the extent of my capacity.
Another question, a little different from what you've been saying, but since you've been in this space for a while, what's your view on mobile health and how it kind of integrates with HIEs, and how can it help with the improved diagnosis and other aspects of healthcare system?
Mobile health as in device
Integration with the backend data and stuff.
So I know we're doing a lot of work on that, and I know that like our OBIEE platform, our dashboarding tool, can run on mobile devices, but quite honestly, I don't know a lot about it. There are people who are focusing on that, but it's kind of outside my realm of responsibility, so sorry.
Mark, you're absolutely right. I mean, Oracle's OBIEE tools, which are pretty much significantly offer advanced capabilities also with Oracle's acquisition of S-Base, are pretty mobile capable now. And not only is the tool capable, Oracle's actually delivering mobile-friendly applications on various analytic ends. Not yet in healthcare, but I know we are looking at some of the areas pretty close to home.
I mean, inherently we are, because we're writing our products on top of our data warehouse in OBI-EE, and it's enabled for mobile devices. But as far as specific to mobile devices, we're kind of leaving that to the tools group that's making those products enabled for mobile devices.
So I have a question right here. Right here at the back. So everyone agrees that you're dealing with a lot of data today, and you're potentially going to deal with a lot of data going from here to everlasting time. How many of your people that you interact with look at big data as a solution to handle this kind of data?
I'm sorry, look at what as a solution?
Big data like Hadoop systems or HDFS systems for solving this problem.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, so Prashant, do you know that?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Maybe I need to understand that a little bit better. I guess I'm not aware of what you're asking me, so maybe we can talk offline.
Sure.
We love big data. We're also a hardware company.
Yeah, but you deal with structured data, so now you're talking about structured and unstructured data.
Our analytical solution, actually, the warehouse and analytical solution that we have deals with both unstructured and structured data.
We've got a pretty comprehensive data warehouse that Mark mentioned that has, 36 subject areas, 6,000 tables, 14,500 columns, and I challenge anybody in the room to top that. We've got a pretty comprehensive suite of master data management efforts that are ongoing, rules-based frameworks that will work, and the entire gamut leading to end-user focused analytical applications that we develop on our own, or we develop with partners like Sanjoy's former company here. So, and when we do have unstructured data, which is the reality of where we are unstructured, being approximately anything between 30 to 50% of data that comes to us from your average provider, we are coming up with ways to basically convert that into structured data and deal with it through various NLP-based mechanisms. I don't know if that's exactly the answer you're looking for, but then it's just that I'm not educated enough in the topic.
Yeah, I'll talk to you after.
Mark, I have a question with respect to Oracle Health Science. So what's the strategy of Oracle Health Science? Is it mostly on the hospital side, or is there anything around the physician base?
So, first of all, Oracle Health Sciences is a fairly broad group. We're about 1,700 people strong. And we cover products in the life sciences space and in the healthcare space. In the life sciences space, we're kind of, I've heard people refer to us as kind of the epic of clinical trials. we're pretty much a leader in that space, clinical trials and safety. So a lot of what we do is based on that area of clinical development. And on the healthcare side, our focus is really about interoperability and analytics and data warehousing. And if you think about that, it's really about a comprehensive view of the patient record. So that lends itself to not being just inpatient, not just being ambulatory, but looking at the longitudinal record across not only ambulatory and inpatient, but also wellness information about the patient when they're not a patient, but just an individual. And so we don't differentiate between the two. Certainly there are different problems in getting the data out of a physician office EMR system than there is in getting the data out of a hospital-based EMR system. The problems are typically based on economies of scale. If you have 10 physician offices that use one system and it costs you, some X amount of dollars to get the data out of that system, that's a lot of money per doc. Whereas it can be the same effort to get the data out of an EMR that's in a hospital that's got thousands of patients. So usually those problems are about economies of scale. Sometimes they're about standards because a lot of the physician office systems are mom and pop systems that my cousin Joe from down the road developed for me, and it really works great for me, but I can't get any data out of it. So there are lots. That's one of the hard things. When I mentioned that's one of the big opportunities in this market. It's really about not about solving a difficult technical problem, but about perhaps innovatively thinking outside the box and trying to solve a simple problem that has 23,000 special cases. And that kind of describes healthcare. You know, what we do in healthcare is not extremely difficult from an IT perspective, but there's an exception to every rule. There's 10 exceptions to every rule. And so to write genericized software to be able to accommodate that is difficult.
So you're not trying to compete with GE or Microsoft or
Not, well, we do compete with Microsoft and I believe GE a little bit too, but not in the area of EMRs. We're not trying to build applications that do charting and real-time, you know, care of patients. We're more about the secondary use of information. And those companies do that, and actually, you know, Amalga does data warehousing and analytics, what they call it. It's a very different philosophy than we use. And I believe GE does too. So, you know, we do compete with them, but to be honest with you, we don't see those guys too much in the customers we work with. They're usually not there.
We'll just take one last question. There's okay, we have to let our veteran members here of the committee. Okay. Last 2 questions, please.
My flight's in the morning, so.
I recently heard IBM group involved in life sciences, and they have a so-called venture group where they don't invest money in the company, but they collaborate and cooperate to develop some of the issues involved with data management, analytics, and so on and so forth, which sounded very different kind of business model and very attractive. Now, does Oracle do something like that? For example, I'm looking at companies that do personalized medicine where there's a whole range of DNA mutation on an individualized basis in order to do the targeted treatment for oncology area. Do you have in your organization anything that these companies can go and pick the brains or collaborate on developing analytics for these things?
So you're talking about companies that are developing niche solutions that might be complementary to what we do. That's probably the, you know, what we would require. I mean, we work with a lot of our partners and collaborate on different solutions. In fact, almost always when we answer an RFP, we're doing it in collaboration with partners, either big SIs who do the kind of consulting that we don't prefer to do, or the niche vendors that provide solutions that we don't have. Depending on who your customer is, there's always holes in the solution that you need to fill as far as requirements go. So we definitely collaborate a lot from a practical sense in that area. And, you know, certainly, you know, as far as investment, things like that are dealt with at Oracle. I mean, we invest a lot, right? It may not be in collaboration, it may be in acquisition, but you know, those situations are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And you know, we're doing work now with some partners where we're developing pieces, they're developing pieces, and they're going to plug together in the end. We also do some, you know, we have a strategic development program for some of our specific customers that are highly strategic for us, where they provide, you know, feedback on requirements and kind of give us information about our products and help us understand how to more accurately meet the mark in the marketplace with the products we're developing. Because let's face it, I mean, we have, I don't know, what do we have, 4 or 5 doctors on staff at Oracle, and several others, clinicians and folks like Prashant, who have worked in the healthcare industry for a long time, have worked for Cerner and Eclipsys, et cetera. So we've got a lot of expertise in healthcare, but we, you know, compare that to somebody like Banner Health, who's got thousands of doctors, you know, and clinicians. There's no way we really can develop these products without getting feedback from our customers, and so we leverage that quite a bit as well.
Mark, just one other point to make on that, coming from an investment and a venture perspective. We do have this thing called the Health Sciences Institute. It tends to be more academic collaborations. I don't know exactly the details of how we invest in those upstream type research efforts, but there is such a program.
Good point. There's nothing to sell there, so I don't know about it very much. But that, you know, that is has incorporated Sun Labs as part of that, because, you know, as everybody knows, we acquired Sun, so part of that research institute came into that Oracle Institute. So we do, you know, we do a lot of collaborative research, things like natural language processing. That's, you know, it's a very important technology, perhaps not totally at the maturity level it needs to be, but, you know, working on getting there. It's a problem that particular problem healthcare's been working on for a lot of years, just like speech recognition. Thanks. Thank you.
I just have one question. Like you talked about problems related to quality of the services, the data which is not there, and one is the cost. One way of reducing the cost is globalizing the services. So is the Oracle doing anything to globalize the healthcare services to reduce the global cost?
Sure. So we have a large offshore contingent, as you might imagine. We have offices in India and other areas around the world, and that's part of our development team. A large part of our development team is in India. And okay, so things like Nighthawk, radiology services, yeah. Yeah, I don't know where we're doing that exactly. I mean, we would be open to that, but I understand what you're saying. I don't know where we're doing it, but we probably are. You know, Oracle's a big enough company that, you know, I could tell you one thing and it's being done down the block and I don't know it. So I would imagine we are. You know, when we typically sell solutions in the U.S. or Canada, which is my realm, we will use services offshore as part of our services delivery team, but as far as like ASP or SaaS type services, we're not doing that at this point. But, you know, there are lots of things like that we're looking at in the future.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for...
Thank you very much.